I'll have to readjust the camera when I set it down and hook the projector up. Hi. Hello, recording. So first, I want to talk about what we're doing today. So we've had week 8, day 2. I went over the research paper assignment, the whole thing. Then we had grading conferences on last Monday. And then we had me go over the research paper planning in detail and finding a topic, looking for it, which databases are best for what, how to build a works cited page, that kind of stuff last time. So that was week 9, day 2. So today and next time we're going to be talking about argumentation and what it means to have an argumentative essay. And spoiler alert, it's mostly approaching it in a logical way, trying to use logic and evidence to make a point. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that so you can kind of get the idea of how you should approach your topic, because you're going to be trying to write an argumentative research style essay. I also want to talk about grading, which I know you haven't turned anything in, so you're like, why are they talking about grading? Oh, and by the way, video, the lights are going to cut off the entire time this video is happening because the sensor is messed up, I think, and so it keeps thinking nobody's here about every 2 minutes, sometimes every 10 seconds. Just depends. So you'll see the lights cutting on and off. Now, grading. So have I mentioned all before that I have this horrible tendency of human psychology to get... Well, here, let me approach this first by accusing you of the same thing. Do you ever have so many homework assignments, like 5 to 10 or so, and you're like, okay, I need to figure out which one to do first, which one to prioritize, that you get extremely and incredibly overwhelmed and end up spending 4 hours on Facebook or Netflix instead? Does that happen to you? Is that a thing that happens? Doesn't happen to any of you? Does? I got one confirmation. You're not being graded on this. You're like, if I say yes, I get an F. No, it's well, that happens to me too. It's a human psychology thing where when you're presented with too many possibilities, you end up going with none of them. It's this weird thing of like being overwhelmed. So I don't know what caused this to click for me. Did I mention this in class last week that I found a Blackboard setting? No? Good. So this is the first time. So I always thought that it was like the app wasn't very good, like the Blackboard app. You know, you try to use it on your phone, and did you all try to use the Blackboard app? It basically just let you look at your grades, I think. I don't think it does much more than that. Maybe you can do stuff on it. Can you? You can turn in your assignments using the Blackboard app? Okay, so you can do it with some stuff. But for the teachers, it doesn't do anything. I'm logged in as a teacher. I never get notifications of anything. But I noticed I get a daily Blackboard summary email. Y'all probably get emails whenever you get something graded. Is that right? Like something gets graded and it sends you an email and says, hey, this has been graded. For me, it just sent me a summary of like, well, this many papers are submitted today. And it'll even tell me like 0 papers submitted today. I was like, oh, okay, thank you. And I was like, I never look at that. But then I thought, well, maybe Blackboard has settings where I can mess with notifications and how I get them. So I went in and found them, and I found that you can turn off all the settings, and the only one I turned on was when somebody submits an assignment for grading. So now anytime that somebody submits something for grading, it sends me an email and says, hey, there's something there to grade. And I was like, hey, okay. So discussion posts that students turned in last night, those all got graded. Essays for revision people turned in over the weekend, those all got graded. I have nothing to grade. It's blank. I don't know what to do. I'm just sitting here waiting for research paper plannings to come in. I think one of those came in, and I graded it. Isn't that neat? So hopefully we just keep this up, keep this gravy train rolling. Has anybody heard a song by Casey Musgraves? I heard it this weekend. It's said, mind your own biscuits and life will be gravy. So clever. You don't know what Casey Musgraves is from, I believe, Rains, Texas? Just a few miles away. Isn't that neat? Have y'all heard that song before? It's like, what does it say? Kiss lots of boys or kiss lots of girls, if that's what you're into. But it's like a country song. Y'all heard that song before? She also does another one. I can't remember what that one is. Because that's Casey Musgraves, and she came from right over there in Rains, Texas. That's fun, huh? Now, what have we done with our lives? Nothing yet, but we'll do important things. So I found out when everything's turned in for grading now, how I got to. So I really think that that's going to be a good thing for us. Good thing for you. Now, we don't know. When the plantings start coming in, I see, 80 plantings, my brain may just somewhat shut down. Or like I'm sitting there grading one and like my brain is just kind of fizzling out like while I'm trying to grade it. It's possible, but I really don't think it's going to happen. I think this new setting thing, because I'm really good without notifications. I was getting them graded like gangbusters last night. I really don't know what that phrase means. I just know I heard Dave Chappelle use it. I really don't even know what that relates to. So if it's something horrible, disregard it, because I have no idea what it actually means. Let's see. Have any questions before we start getting into argumentation, the PowerPoint?
When is the planning thing due?
The planning thing will be due, I think, like the final date that it can be. Well, not final date. Let's just say Wednesday is your official date that it's due, Wednesday night. But I do have it in the system as Thursday.
Okay.
So you could turn it in on Thursday. However, I would caution you not to wait on that thing. The sooner you get it in, the better, because those are fairly easy for me to grade. They take me about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. So I'll be grading those as soon as they come in all the time. And I'll usually prioritize those over papers. So even like once the research paper's turned in, if by some weird chance I have a research paper planning come in that late, I'll still grade that before I start grading papers. Because I want people to be able to know if their research idea is going to work before they try to actually do it. And that's what the whole idea of this research paper planning assignment is that you're proposing an idea, I approve it, then you write it. And if you get a grade back that's not a 9 or a 10, you get something like an 8 or below, especially like a 3 or a 4. That means redo it, fix something, revise it, then submit it again. Because if I gave you an 8, it means that I think the highest you'll end up getting is an 80. If I give you a 6, it means the highest you'll end up getting is a 60. So my suggestion is to go ahead and redo it, resubmit it, because that's going to be a lot better for you. And one time I had a student write, so I said, pick something from the last 30 years? Isn't that what I said on the thing? Somebody picked the Holocaust. I said, this won't work. Don't do this. Give me a completely new topic. And I gave them the guidelines for what kind of topic to choose. Student never looked at the feedback. They took their 1 and then wrote the paper, which was a report on what happened in the Holocaust. And I said, this is not what I want. 10. Because I gave them a 1, right? This is what I anticipate you getting. And I was like, well, they got it. They did it. So I gave them a 1. And they were like, what happened? Why did I get this grade? And I said, I told you it was going to happen. You got to expect it. So do look at the feedback on those. Y'all know I give feedback, right? I've had a few revisions so far that were turned in with like just a couple of words changed on the essay. But I gave specific instructions as to what I wanted changed in order to get the higher grade. And I don't know if it's like a testing the waters thing where people are like turning in the essays with just a couple changes first to see if I even look. Or if I just assign more points. And I look. So I had one student do that. I had 2 students do that, I think even like yesterday or the day before. They came in and I looked and I was like, yeah, this is nothing but like 4 or 5 words change. Or one literally had no changes. It was the same essay turned in 2 times. And I was like, yeah, this is exactly the same. Then the student who sent me exactly the same one added a paragraph at the end. But it was a cause-effect assignment where I said, I want you to take all these 4 paragraphs you have about causes, get rid of them, turn it into 1 paragraph about the cause, then give me solution paragraphs. You've got nothing about solutions. So the student gave me 1 extra paragraph about solutions but left all those cause paragraphs there. And I said, that is better because you're covering solutions, so 5 more points. But it still is not what I asked for. And then the student finally turned it in and gave me like 3 paragraphs of solutions, 1 with a cause. And I was like, boom, that's what I'm looking for. That was a revision. And so I will caution you, look at the feedback. Because you go right where you submitted that assignment, it'll show your paper here, comments you made to me here, feedback to learner down there. And it'll tell you everything I think you need to fix. Okay? It's going to be the same with the research paper planning. Look at that feedback to learner, most important section. And by the way, that student did eventually get an A. Turned it in 4 times. I think he was just testing me, though. He's like, let's just add some words. Dang it. Let's add some more words. Dang, he really wants me to fix it. Like, this is not like a add 3 words and try again. Any more questions? I think that all somehow came from Brian's question, though. Am I afraid to ask a question because I can just go anywhere? I mean, they were important directions, right? You think so. I know so. You ready to do this? Let's do this. Let's talk about argumentation. Did I hear a ooh? Is that what I hear? Yeah. Ooh, argumentation. It's mysterious. It's exciting. Nah, it's not that exciting. We're trying to get rid of the pathos. What does that mean? I don't know. Let's find out. Did Mr. Rogers have a song at the beginning of the show?
Yeah.
What? How did it go?
I remember he took off his shoes and every time.
A lot of people found that really creepy. Was it? He had a hammer?
No, we could say howdy neighbor.
Oh, yeah. Will you be? Won't you be? My neighbor.
Won't you be my neighbor?
Did you know that he was so revered, I think in Philadelphia, where he came from, that one time his car was stolen until it was reported that Mr. Rogers' car was stolen, and the thieves then returned it with a note of apology. They said, "We're sorry, Mr. Rogers, we didn't realize it was you." Like, that's how well respected he was in Philadelphia. Like, did anybody know that he was a minister?
No.
He never once mentioned religion on his show. He was a minister and believed in being nice to people and good to people, but not forcing religion on them. Isn't that interesting? Interesting guy. Yet here I am bringing up his religion, despite the fact that he tried not to force it on you. That's ironic, isn't it? Let's see. Argumentation, using reasoning, logic, and defending a position. That's essentially a good summary of exactly what argumentation is. This is the first time I've used this in, golly, how long? 4 weeks almost? I forgot it existed. I was like, how am I going to move the slides? And then I realized, PowerPoint was there. Using reasoning, logic, and defending a position. So, argumentation is a process of reasoning that asserts the soundness of a debatable position, belief, or conclusion. So what argumentation does is going to be very important to your paper and in choosing a topic. It takes a stand supported by evidence and urges people to share the writer's perspectives and insights. I don't know if this is the class that asked the question, but I don't believe it is. I think I remember the class that asked the question, but one person said, are we telling what the arguments are for it, or are we specifically taking a stand in this argument and saying this is the right side of the argument? And that's what you're doing. You're taking a stand on which side of the argument is the right side. If you're choosing something like gun control, you're not going to say, well, some people think that guns should be more controlled, some think it should be less controlled, and just leave it at that. That's not what you want to do. You want to say, we need less gun control, we need more gun control, and especially in a specific way. We'll get to that in the thesis section, but you're definitely taking a stand and you're supporting that stand by evidence. So that's what I said when I was talking to you about the research balance checklist. I showed you all that, right? And it's now attached on the research argumentation essay planning section. That when I say you have 4 articles of supporting and 1 opposing, and you may very well, and especially if you're looking at academic journal articles, you may find articles that are more neutral in tone. They seem not to be opposing one side or the other, and that's fine too. But you should have more articles that are supporting your side of the argument than you have articles that are against your side of the argument. That's because you want to use the evidence to take a stand on that issue. Now, different uses you can have of argumentation, and this is kind of like just logically figuring this out, but you could convince other people to accept your position, which is essentially what you're doing in this paper. But outside of this paper, you could also use it to defend your position in other areas of life when you're using argumentation. Or you could question or refute an existing position. And you may be doing little bits of all of that stuff in this paper. But for the most part, you'll be trying to convince other people to accept your position. I do want to get to the idea, just freaking lights. I've been so good at ignoring it, but it's just so hard. I feel like the lights are kind of like, you know, like when there's a person whose kid won't behave, and like they're like, mama, 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 and like grabbing on the pant leg, and she's just like I feel like that's all I can do right now is like, shh, like stoplights. Like I can't do anything. The kid's just gonna act up. There's nothing I can do. They're just gonna keep trying to get attention. Yes, lights, we know you're there, but it's not gonna do anything. I want to kill him. I just want to kill him. You know, something really bad too is that I have no patience for people who have children that act up. No patience for that. I'm just like, what the hell are you doing at your house? Yeah. So these lights are killing me right now. I'm just like, what do you? We're gonna take you to the car, and we're gonna have a discussion. Lights. I want to talk to you about argumentation and how you see it comes from the word argue and like have an argument, but that's not meant to have the negative connotations that we do for arguments these days. Anytime you use the argument, you're generally using it in a negative way, right? Like, oh, I don't want to have an argument with my girlfriend or my wife or my mom or my dad, because an argument sounds negative in that context, right? Really what argument means is you're just supporting your position. Most of the time people say, like, I don't like talking about politics, is because they don't like two people getting angry about politics back and forth. My dad and I, at least my mom told me that politics get my dad really angry. I just like talking about politics and kind of supporting my case, but I don't get angry about it. I just like making a case for something and hearing the other side out and going, oh, okay, interesting. And that's what argumentation is meant to be. It's just presenting a side, and then you'll have to defend your position, question or refute their position. And it's not meant to have the anger or emotion associated with it in true argumentation form. Now, the difference between argumentation versus persuasion. I don't know if this is the case. I would think it would be. But in your speech class, American speech, right now, I would assume mostly persuasion is what's used if you're trying to convince somebody of doing something in a speech class in one of your speeches. Persuasion is where you're using pathos, ethos, and logos fairly equally to make an argument or to make a stand. But argumentation is meant to be almost entirely the appeal to logos. Now, I haven't explained what any of those terms mean yet, but I will in the next couple slides. So you have to think of, in the next couple slides, you're going to see those words explained, and we're going to think, okay, well, I need to stick strictly to logos for my paper. So I need to find something that I can use logos to make my point. So what does that mean? Let's find out. The meaning of these words, pathos, ethos, and logos, essentially, pathos are appeals that are based on emotion. So you're trying to get somebody to agree with your point, making emotional points along the way. Ethos are when you're trying to appeal to somebody's sense of credibility. Essentially, like the person who's trying to persuade you, you want that person to be somebody who sounds respectable and somebody who is maybe intelligent, seems to care. Just they seem like an ethical person from the outside. And then logos are appeals based on logic. So when we have an argumentation paper, we're going to almost entirely appeal to what's logical. You're going to use the evidence to make your case, and you're not going to be trying to use emotional arguments. And you shouldn't be focusing on trying to look credible. Since it's an essay, you can get away with having something be almost completely logos. If you were to give a speech in front of like a board of representatives, what would you do differently that day before you give that speech? Something you have to make sure that you do if you're going to stand in front of those people. Even before you start talking, what do you do? You dress nice. In a paper, you don't have to really dress nice. The closest thing to dressing nice is to use like proper grammar, sound fair, but there's not really, that's why in a paper we can do argumentation, which is almost purely the appeal to logic. And I think in a speaking scenario, it's very hard to do that because people are going to look at what you're wearing, and your outward appearance becomes part of that ethos, where that's not something you have to worry about. You can be typing your essay in your shorts and like a stained tank top. Nobody's going to care. Ethos is not that big a concern, at least from outward appearance, but it does find its way in other ways. Now, pathos is when you're making an appeal to emotion. It's used to persuade a reader through his or her feelings. So the book, I believe, gives an example, or gave at one time. In a discussion of whether to lower the drinking age from 21 to 18, one might write in their essay a story about an 18-year-old alcoholic. Aww. Or point out that an increase in accidents involving drunk drivers would kill innocent people as well. The problem with appeals to emotion is that they're not really logical when you get at their core. So they may often, and actually a lot of times people are more convinced by emotional arguments. That's why a lot of times people are driven to make decisions based on fear, because if you make somebody afraid, they're very likely to want to assuage that fear. Like, how do I get rid of that fear? I need to create a situation in which I'm no longer afraid. So if you can create false fear, you can get people to go along with many ideas as a result. But in this particular situation, the 18-year-old alcoholic, if we think logically about this, that's a sad story. But there's no evidence, at least just from the story, that this is the norm. I mean, how many 18-year-olds are alcoholics? And I don't see a statistic here, I just see, but what about Joseph, who's an alcoholic? He's only 18. Well, one, how did he get access to alcohol in the first place? He already had it when the age was 21. So apparently that law is not preventing him from getting the alcohol. He's still an 18-year-old alcoholic. So in fact, changing the age from 21 to 18 is not going to have any effect on his scenario, apparently. Unless you're arguing that lowering the age from 21 to 18 will make him less likely to drink alcohol, which you'd have to make a point in that somehow, but I don't see it here. So this is just trying to get people to be sad for the 18-year-old. He's got his world ahead of him. Nobody would tell a story about you have an 80-year-old alcoholic. This is not as sad. And I know it's terrible to say that, but in terms of logic, somebody would want to tell of the most innocent person they could think of, seemingly innocent person, to be unfair. And like I said, innocent, point out that an increase in accidents involving drunk drivers would kill innocent people as well. Do you realize how many innocent people die in car wrecks? Well, what you should really worry about is how many people die in car wrecks. What does their innocence matter? If you think about it, there's a lot of things in this world we think of as logical. When you really think about it, isn't logical. We just are so used to thinking it that it seems to make sense to us, and we accept the premise without really thinking about the aspects of that premise. So, for example, there was a sentence one time I read about how it was somebody made it said it was a logical argument, something like babies deserve our love, so we should care for them. And I was like, I don't think that babies deserve our love. I think that we have a biological imperative to fulfill the needs of babies, but I don't think they deserve it. I mean, the word deserve is somebody's earned something, right? In what way does a baby earn its keep? The baby merely looks adorable. It has a biological mechanism to make you want to take care of it. Did you know that's why things look so cute when they're young? There's a softening of the features. Is it when think of like if you had like a Benjamin Button, right? You remember Benjamin Button, that movie? It was like the guy was born an old man and then grew into a young baby. Isn't that weird? So imagine your baby came out looking like it was like 100 years old, like a little tiny old man baby. People wouldn't want to take care of that. You're like so I mean it has soft, innocent-looking features. So we say, our children deserve our love. Well, not really. They just get it because there's no biological imperative to make that happen. Children have not. I mean, what does the baby do to earn it? Nothing, right? In fact, baby probably makes your life a more difficult for like 18 years. Then you can make it go pay rent somewhere else. But it's so funny. I'm saying all this like while my wife's pregnant with a baby. I can't let her watch this. Oh crap! Is my head cut off right now? I just realized like I set that thing up like I was going to be sitting. Yeah, it's cut off. Who needs to see my face? You know? Y'all don't deserve to have to see my face. So, I mean, really, if you think about logically about something at its core and really think, okay, do babies deserve love? That implies earning. They've earned nothing. We merely take care of them. It's a very human thing to do. Take care of babies, right? And a lot of times you got to watch out for emotional arguments because they can be problematic. Did I tell you the story of the one time I had an essay where the argument against legalizing marijuana came from a person who, I believe, somebody at their apartment complex smoked marijuana a lot, and then they left something, I don't know, going like a cigarette. Like anybody could do this with a cigarette too, but like left the thing burning and like caught the apartment complex on fire, and the person was having to save everybody in their apartment complex. And so the argument was, we shouldn't legalize marijuana because those people start fires. The problem was, it was just she had such an emotional attachment to her experience with marijuana, which the only time she didn't smoke it, so the only time she ever came in contact with it was when she found out the person who smoked it burned down an apartment complex. So for her, that's her experience. So she was creating an emotional argument about, well, we can't, because they're dangerous. They burn down apartment complexes. But that wasn't a logical point, it was merely an emotional point. And it ended up becoming a story like the 18-year-old alcoholic where it didn't really work. You know, you have to look at something statistically. Is it viable over a large group over time? And that's what we're going to get to with logos. Now, ethos is a little harder to pin down. It's an appeal to the credibility of the persuader. So if you're persuading people, you want to look credible, like somebody that could be listened to. Various methods are used to achieve this. The writer persuades the reader to think that he or she is credible, reliable, respectable, and ethical. So in an essay, there's various ways to achieve this. A writer might concede certain arguments to the other side. So you just recognize that one of the arguments that you're trying to make, or aspects of your argument, might not be that great. So if somebody's saying, well, we should have free education for all first-year public higher education students. You know, one of the biggest arguments against that immediately is going to be what? If we provide free education to students, what's the biggest argument against that from the onset?
Cost.
Yeah, it's going to cost a lot of money. So, in a sense, you're going to have to concede that one. You're going to have to say, yes, this will cost a lot, but you'll also have to try to counter it. So you'll have to say, it will cost a lot, but the cost is worth it, because it will put more people into the economy who can work and raise that economy up. Now, not everybody who reads that paper is going to buy that argument, but you're at least saying, well, yes, it's going to be expensive. And that's a way to sort of concede the argument. I mean, you're not going to argue, no, it's actually going to make us more money. Your taxes will go down. Like, that's absurd. It's just a lie. It's going to make people's taxes go up, I mean, if it's done right, or done the way that they mean to do it. And a good idea for ethos is to use only those of, I stopped at one, so I need to continue. Use sound logic. So I know it sounds weird to say that using sound logic is a way to protect your ethos, but if you sound logical, people are more likely to believe you. Possess a voice appropriate to his or her audience. For this paper, I kind of want you to approach it as though, and I mentioned this when we were talking about the research paper when I assigned it, but I want you to approach it like it's anybody picking up your paper could read this paper. Who was, maybe of college age, adult age, could read this paper and be convinced of the argument you're making, regardless of background, religious creed. So in a sense, your audience is a universal one. But in situations in life, I'm sure you'll see all kinds of places where you have to really pay attention to who your audience is and how do you possess a voice that's appropriate to that audience. A lot of people wouldn't talk the same to get a point across at church Like if you're trying to get a point across to somebody at church, you wouldn't speak the same way you might speak to get a point across to somebody where you work. Because if you work, let's say, in a very physically demanding field, I mean, you might just be a kind of group of guys where there's a lot of cursing going on. Sometimes to get your point across, you got to do a little bit of the cursing too, so people like understand that the point you're trying to make is you're like if you don't use the cursing, it might look kind of suspiciously. It's like, oh, is he like was Mr. I don't do anything wrong, golden boy over here? Like you might make people suspicious of you, so you've got to kind of use that language to fit in. Whereas at church, if you're like, you know, we need to change this little thing about the service, and you're trying to make that argument, but you're throwing swear words in there, they're going to disregard everything you say because they're like, you know, you're not supposed to do that here. And so you've got to possess a voice that's appropriate to your audience. For me, it's going to be a universal audience, like you're writing to the largest group of people you think that can agree with you. You want to exhibit correct grammar and mechanics. There's just something about, this is probably why your teachers always harped on it so heavily. For years and years and years. I mean, y'all have some teachers, I'm sure, graded almost entirely on mechanics and grammar, right? Just lots of red pen markings wherever you did something wrong. There are some people, you know, who they just look at a paper and it's got bad grammar. They instantly think the person writing is not intelligent. And that's not the case. But a lot of people do view it that way. So it might be a good idea to have somebody go over your grammar and spelling and just read it. Hey, can you look at this for me? I know you're good at that kind of stuff. Before you turn it in, because it just might be a good idea. I know too that Microsoft Word's had some updates, and their grammar and spelling checker, by the way, if you use the grammar and spell checker on Microsoft, don't be lazy. Okay? You might be thinking, hey, I'm doing my grammar and spell check. I'm not lazy, I'm one of the good students. But then it pops it up there, and it says 85 suggestions. You know, and you're like, cool, 3-page paper, 85 mistakes, awesome. And that's just the ones it caught. And you're like, here we go. And what do? You hover your finger over that button that says yes, and you just start clicking, right? Click, 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 click. Yes, 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 yes. Is it the right word? Did they suggest a different word? Who cares? Click, 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 click. You get to the end, you're like, boom, got it. And then I'm reading a paper about somebody saying, heaven forbid, your computer misunderstands what you mean to say when you were trying to type fracking and changes it to something else. That would be horrible. I did one time have a student who submitted a paper with the F word because I guess she added it to her dictionary on Microsoft Word and then it auto-corrected in the spell check. And she's like, I don't know how that happened. It didn't even have a place. Like it was just random in that paper. However, it was a paper about fracking, so I think that's why. And I was like, I'm sorry, but I got to give you like a 50 until you fix that word. Then I'll. She was like, I'm so sorry. But do not just click yes. Look at every change and say, okay, was this the word I was trying to use? Granted, you may have some difficulty because you might not know if that's the word you were trying to use. You're like, it could be. I don't know if that's the right spelling either. Let's just go with it. And then, I can correct you there. But there's a lot of people out there who just, they'll expect good grammar, good spelling. You do want to make those changes, pay attention to those changes. And the editor in Microsoft Word now even has blue underlined stuff that says if you use a word like, and that's really good, it'll tell you there's no reason to use the word really. Would you prefer something that's a better version of good? Like, would you want to say great, amazing? Instead of saying really good, it would say, do you want to say amazing? Like, it's starting to make pretty good suggestions like that. Looking for redundancy, repetition. So it's pretty useful. OpenOffice does not have that suite. And exhibit respect. You want to sound respectful in your paper. You don't want to sound angry about the other side of the argument. There's just something about an angry person. When somebody seems angry when they're trying to make a point, it seems like it's a desperation. It's best to proceed calmly because, I don't know, it just seems more respectful. Now, logos is our real goal here, but logos is an appeal to logic. Uses statistics, evidence, deductive and inductive reasoning, and doesn't contain faulty logic. So you're really thinking about the reality of a situation, what the numbers seem to show, what the evidence seems to show, and only making a case based on that evidence. A person writing a paper in a good way on logos is not going to end up saying, well, these 5 different articles disagree with the point that I'm trying to make, but I'm going to make it anyway. That person's not being logical. If all the evidence points against what you're trying to say, go where the evidence points. Especially when it comes to politics, a lot of people, here's a problem I have. Huge problem I have. Have y'all heard about the whole, you don't want to be these people, okay? Which is, I guess, any politician I'm about to mention. Did y'all hear the whole, I'm sure when the election was happening, there was the whole Hillary email scandal. Remember that Hillary was misusing her email? Remember that? And does anybody remember the phrase that was being used as to what should be done with Hillary? Like what they should do with her as a result of what she did? What was the phrase used? It was a 3-word phrase. What should they do with Hillary?
Hillary for president.
Huh? Oh, no, I'm talking about the people who were against her. What are they saying you need to do?
Hillary for president.
Oh, Hillary for prison. Okay. Oh, prison. I thought you said president. I misheard. And I actually heard it even more kind of scathing. I heard, lock her up, lock her up. Everybody's like, lock her up. She needs to go to prison for this. She needs to be in jail. A lot of people were like, making part of their agenda, like, we're going to prosecute her hard. And Democrats were like, it's no big deal. She may have broke the law, but she's still going to be a good president. She didn't know what she was doing. She's no problems at all. Like almost every Democrat was saying that. I didn't hear a lot of Democrats going, at least the politicians themselves. I'm not talking about people who vote Democrat, but the politicians themselves going, I don't know, she may have done that's pretty bad. Maybe she should go to jail for that. We'll have to see. Maybe we should choose a different candidate. Now they were just like, Hillary for president, Hillary for president. You lay off of Hillary. You're just saying that because you're Republicans and you want that to be. Okay, so then what happens? Now we have this whole, did Russia communicate with the Trump campaign and collude with them, work with them to help make the election go the Republicans' way? So essentially it would be an argument of treason. Were people committing treason? You know what treason is? It's essentially, I believe essentially treason is a crime against your country. And I believe that helping what Russia wants to happen in your election would kind of skirt the line of whether that's treasonous. So they're trying to do some investigations right now to figure out if there's anything treasonous going on here with Trump's campaign. And there is no evidence yet that Trump has communicated directly with the Russians about this stuff. So I'm not arguing like that. But now what do you see? You see every Democrat prosecute. We got to look into this. This is important. This is the future of our nation. And the Republican, politicians are, well, but I mean, it's just not a. There's no evidence that this is happening. So it's the same thing that was happening with Hillary is happening now with Trump, but on both the different sides of the aisle are flip-flopping situations. And that's not being respectful or fair or credible or ethical. It's doing, in both cases, I thought that both people should be investigated. And I did. I think it's very important to find out what happened with the Russia-Trump situation. It was very important to find out what happened with the Hillary email situation. Do we need to have a president who doesn't know what to do with sensitive information when running the country? I don't necessarily know that I think that. Should we have a president who helped the Russians achieve the results they wanted in an American election? That was actually one of the reasons that the Electoral College was started, was to keep that kind of thing from happening. The Electoral College could vote against the popular vote if they believed there was some other nation interfering with the election. And I believe that was specifically at the time meant to counter literal vote changes, not social media campaigns. But it's very important in both situations to do the investigation from a logical standpoint. If somebody's doing something wrong, should we investigate it? Yes. The problem is a lot of people, they pick and choose what they want the right answer to be, and for whatever's more convenient for them. But think about from a logical standpoint. Does the evidence seem to point in that situation? So you got to use the statistics, logic, evidence, deductive and inductive reasoning. Should we want truth? Yes. If we want truth, we should investigate. That's the truth in both situations. And I already mentioned this, the argument is different from persuasion, that the entire argument basically tries to center around logic, whereas persuasion tries to use emotional appeals. Tries to have a heavy focus on ethics and credibility. Looking respectable. Papers, though, mostly logos. Now, when you're choosing a topic, and I mentioned, where to go to choose a topic the other day, and I kind of talked about this. I don't know if I talked about it in as much detail as I wanted to. You do need to have an intellectual stake in whatever topic you choose. So you want to be interested in it. You want to care about the results of what you're wanting to find. It's very important. Otherwise, you can get bored and not. I don't suggest going on there and being like, oh, gun control. And they're like, oh, okay, you chose gun control. So you're like, what do you think just off the top of your head? I don't know. I don't even care about gun control. Well, then don't choose it. Choose something you look at that topic and go, I'm kind of interested to know what the answer is here. That's the kind of topic you should approach. Be open-minded and willing to consider all sides of a question. If the evidence goes against your position, you should be willing to change your position. So if you go into that paper and you have an inkling of what you think might be the case, and then you start doing the research and the research points the other way, you should be willing to change that idea. One of the better papers I've had, or the better situations I can talk about for this, is I had a student one time. She was old enough to have a son who was an adult. And she had recently learned that he was working, and this is, I think, just before it was, no, it might have been legalized at this point in Colorado, but her son was working in one of those dispensaries, or he was actually farming marijuana and also working in a dispensary in Colorado. And I think he had his own shop set up. And she was very conflicted about this. She's from Texas, so very conservative. Generally, the conservative stance on drugs is don't legalize them. Right? Am I wrong about that? I think that's right. Am I right? Nobody knows. Nobody's shaking their head yes. Let's just assume I'm correct, because that's the best situation. I would just assume if somebody's talking and they sound authoritative, to believe them, right? Or should we check if I'm right or wrong? Everybody's checked out right now, I think. Hello? Should I repeat it? I'll repeat it. The conservative stance generally on drugs is less legalization of drugs. Like, don't legalize marijuana, don't legalize crack cocaine, don't legalize heroin, right?
It's changing, but yeah.
So just shifting?
At least on marijuana. I don't know about the rest, but
Probably not.
Which I've always thought is kind of ironic. I've always thought this is kind of ironic. If conservative is like essentially the side of states' rights, freedom, let the state choose. They should be perfectly okay with Colorado doing what they're doing, I would think. But her son was working there, and she was kind of having a conflict about it because she was more of a traditionalist and thought, okay, marijuana bad. But now her son's working in that field. And anytime you have that emotional attachment, she's curious. She's like, oh, well, my thing is that maybe it shouldn't be legalized. Maybe it's a bad idea. And so she wanted to write a paper over marijuana legalization, which I thought was kind of interesting, because usually I have young 18-year-old students who want to smoke pot are the ones who argue for legalization. She did not seem like that. So she wrote the paper and assumed that when she went in that she would find that there was lots of reasons we shouldn't legalize it. And ended up writing a paper where she said, well, now I'm seeing that there's all these other benefits. There's tax benefits, and those taxes can be used for other things, and keeps us from having to charge more taxes of people. We can just tax the marijuana. It helps. So she ended up writing a pro legalization of marijuana paper, and you could tell there was like a tone of openness. She was kind of open-minded about it because it was something that she didn't expect to end up thinking, but you kind of felt that in the paper, that she didn't think this would be the case, but it ended up being the case based on the evidence she read. So the evidence really didn't tell her kind of what to think about it. And that's kind of how you should approach your paper. Whatever the evidence says, that's where you kind of end up going. not let me find evidence that I can push and pull into the argument that I want to make. That's not how you should approach it when choosing a topic. And also be able to consider your topic from other people's viewpoints. I really do think that the biggest problem that we have in the world today, if you want to write this down, children, you can, is that people are unwilling or unable to see from other people's perspectives. If we would just think, well, how does this affect this person who comes from this background? Then all of our problems will be solved. But for the most part, people are selfish and unimaginative and see things only from their own perspectives. Right? A lot of times that's true. You know? When you're poor, this happens a lot. So a lot of people come to people when they're poor, they vote Democrat. And then when they start earning money and they get their own job and then maybe they get their own company, well, now their taxes are being taken out. They don't like that, so now they're Republicans. But then if they ever got poor again, well, I'm a Democrat again. It's just, whoever benefits me, that's where I'm going. So don't be that person. Be able to consider your topic from other people's viewpoints and think logically, what's the right thing, not what do I think right now and how do I make that be the case? Don't do that. And if you can't be open-minded on your topic, you should choose another topic you can deal with more objectively. If you're like, I can't wait to write this gun control paper, I love guns, probably not the best paper to write. Because you're trying to find a way to make guns be okay. You're like, how do I make this happen? Even if all the evidence out there points toward guns are great. You know, I would say that most of the evidence out there right now, climate scientists are saying that climate change is real. In fact, I mentioned that student who could not find articles that said the other thing. He was trying to find a climate scientist who said that climate change was not real, couldn't do it. If you're somebody who passionately believes that climate change is a real thing, you probably shouldn't write a climate change paper either. Because even though all the evidence points toward the idea that you would naturally believe to be the case, the fact that you believe it so strongly could make you be biased and unwilling to consider the possible things against your ideas. So even though it's highly evidenced that that's the case, you probably still shouldn't write that paper because you're unwilling to be open-minded. What if all the evidence changes tomorrow? You'd be unwilling to consider it. They say, oh no, it turns out climate change isn't real. And the climate scientists were wrong. They just discovered this new thing that shows why they're wrong. You know, then you would be unwilling to consider it because it doesn't go with the narrative you want to believe. You know, you want to save the earth. You want to go green. Not the legalization of marijuana green, the green living, which is like, let more green things grow. Is that what they call it, green? Don't hurt the green things? I don't know either. I don't know why they call it that. Y'all think about that and come up with an answer. I'm going to ask you later, children. Y'all realize I say children as a joke, right? Okay, good. Because I mean, generally speaking, it used to be the case that y'all are all kind of around my age. I don't know, now I'm kind of getting older. And not so much the case anymore. But I don't mean that serious. I don't think of you as children. I use it more like there's a comedian that did it. I can't remember who it is. Developing a thesis. So, in an argumentative essay, your thesis must take a stand, must be debatable. A good argumentative thesis will be something that could be debatable. So here's an example of this is confusing. I was going to say a good example of a bad thesis. But here's an example of a bad thesis. Blood is necessary to the function of the human body. Now, that may have been a pretty good thesis to have many years ago. And even more recently than them not knowing that, you know, washing hands is important to prevent the spread of sickness. They didn't always think that. The guy who first published on that idea ended up dying in an insane asylum because he went insane trying to convince people that washing your hands was kind of important, that you don't want to go from people who have the plague to go deliver a baby because the baby might die of plague if you don't wash your hands. And the doctors did not accept that idea. They said, "You're crazy. How dare you call us dirty? Doctors aren't dirty." And he was essentially bullied into obscurity, and nobody ever believed him, and he died in an asylum. Just because he said, maybe we should wash our hands before touching the newly born babies. And I believe I heard from students this morning that guy's name was Joseph Lister. You might want to look that. I think that was his name. So that's a bad thesis now. Might have been a good thesis back in the day. But right now, since it's so readily available and accepted and nobody would debate this idea, not a great thesis. It's obvious and not necessarily debatable. Biological fact these days, no point in writing that paper, at least not in our current time period. It's why I don't allow cancer papers either. Cancer is bad. That's right. Nobody disagrees. Well, there might be some people who would disagree. Anybody know that China just recently lifted its children limitation policy? I don't know if they've gone up to 2 or if they've just lifted it completely. What have they done?
Yeah, I've heard they just lifted it. I didn't hear anything about the limitation. I know they just went away from the one-child law.
Yeah. So, what do they call it? They called it one child left behind, right? I'm just kidding. You said one child.
I was like, yeah, you're on your own now. I don't know.
Yeah. I really do honestly think that China had a pretty good idea. I know it sounds terrible, but we're in a world of medical advancements where we're living longer, yet it's a finite world without infinite resources. We're losing, I think I read the figure was 20,000 acres of arable farmland per day. So we're over farming a land that can't support as much as we are farming it, and we're steadily increasing the population. Not the best idea. So I think China maybe had the right idea, and they actually, China's Asian cultures often do make societal decisions. They think about the group entire rather than thinking from the individual perspective. We're more of an individualistic society in America, and a lot of Western culture is, we want, the American dream, right? It's I can become whatever I want to be. Whereas in Asian cultures, and there's a guy who has this thesis that says essentially that the reason is this because we basically America got really big farming things like wheat, which one guy could farm a wheat field, but Asian cultures mostly farmed rice, and one guy can't do an entire rice farming outfit. Like it took a whole town, a village. And so this guy argued that that was the reason why they were more sociocentric in their society. Although it's starting to change because people don't spend a lot of time farming anymore, I don't think. Very few people do all the farming now. But some people might argue that cancer, not necessarily bad, because it's a way of controlling the population. And I think that China actually just got so scared. Now, I would not suggest writing that paper. I'll probably be like, that's kind of hokey. It kind of sounds evil, to be honest. But I'm saying that somebody could possibly make that argument in a logical way. And I think that China, though they had the right idea in limiting the population so they don't overtake the few resources that they have there, they realized India did not have that restriction, and India's been booming in population. I think that they were afraid of having their next door neighbor have more people than them, because that gives the possibility of a superior army, which was terrifying. You want to have your next door neighbor have a bigger army than you do, or at least the possibility, right? I wouldn't think so. Like if Canada suddenly had like 400 million people, we'd be like, oh, or like Mexico too. So we're like, great, we're in like a sandwich of more people on both sides of the border. This is scary. Have to make the wall taller. Have you ever noticed that? I don't think Canada has a wall. In fact, I think they have the literal absence of a wall. There's like a cut in the tree line that goes all the way along the border of Canada. Do you know that? It's like if you go to the Canadian border, you look to the left, you look to the right, and depending on where you're at, you'll see like trees, or there's like a huge open line where like they've cut through the border. Interesting. It's the opposite of a border. It's like literally the absence of a wall. Like you look and you're like, no wall there, no wall there. There was a wall. Now the wall's gone because we cut it down. Very strange. Those two different approaches. Now you should have something like this. Education is the best way to address the problem of increased drug use among teenagers. So you're not arguing drug use among teenagers is bad, because I think we can agree on that. That would be a bad thesis. But if you can think of what's the best way to address this, education, then that kind of makes it into a good thesis. One way to test to see if a thesis is good or not is try writing the antithesis, and that just means antithesis or opposite thesis. So write it down. Education is not the best way to address the problem of increased drug use among teenagers. Is that possible? Could there be something that's not education that's the best way to address drug use? What was it? What was it? Say.
Either or, you're still going to have problems.
So you're saying, well, is that possible?
Students get stressed, they Google it away.
So education might not work, you're saying. So since it's possible, that thesis actually works. Since the opposite thesis seems like it could be valid, good call, Evangelina. The only one making good calls. Everybody else silent as a stone wall. Goodness gracious. By the way, thank you. So, because it could also be true depending on how it be argued, this thesis is debatable. If you write down the antithesis for this one, okay guys, blood is not necessary to the function of a human body. And you immediately test that theory, you take somebody's blood out, see if they can still function. Would it work? Oh, I think it would. No. There you go. Would not. That thesis does not work because it doesn't make any sense. So you can always write down the antithesis, and if it's possible that it's true, then it can work. When you're making argumentation, it's always important to talk about audience in every circumstance. We kind of did a little bit, but you need to analyze your audience. In this case, you're going to try to be as universal as possible, where it can appeal to anybody on both sides of the political spectrum, which means you're going to have to make very, very logical arguments with your evidence-based. And you want to assume skeptical readers for a debatable stance. You know, don't assume that the people who are reading your paper are the ones who already agree with you. You need to almost think of it like, okay, I'm trying to convince not just the ones who already agree with me, but those who don't, maybe even are hostile to my position. I need to convince those people this is the right argument. This is the right side. Come with me. But you're not going to say me because that's first person. You're not allowed to do that. You have to appeal to readers who are neutral, perhaps even hostile to your position. You must influence them to be more receptive to your viewpoint, and they're not just going to take your word for it. You must provide evidence that will support your thesis and establish a line of reasoning that will lead logically to your conclusion. It's just going to be really important that you do that. Think from their perspective. That's how you analyze your audience. What would the person who would disagree with this idea think? What would their argument be? So you have to think that you're both yourself making the argument and the person that's disagreeing with you. And imagine what they would say. Then figure out, what do I say to counter the thing that the person who would disagree with me would say. So you're thinking many steps in advance. It's almost like playing chess. Somebody play chess? Some people have heard of it. You know chess? It's like checkers, but the scary one. You know? Like checkers, jump, jump, jump. I got it. Chess is that one with all, like, everybody's got names and they look like they have jobs. It's very scary. Different moves. Oh my gosh. Well, in that game, you're supposed to think many moves ahead to what the other person might do if you make this move. And that's kind of how you need to approach this paper. So if y'all want to become great writers, go learn how to play chess, become a grandmaster, then start writing again. It probably won't do much for you. But you know chess. Gathering evidence. Now you support your argument's points by appealing to reason, by providing evidence. Facts and opinions in support of your position. Like, hey, opinions? What was that? It was like the home improvement guy. Gosh, does that show even people don't even know what that is anymore? Now, kinds of evidence. You can have fact or opinion. Of course, facts are best. But the reason the topic is a debatable topic is because all the facts aren't there. If all the facts aren't there, that's what makes it debatable. So facts are most often statistics of some kind or information that can be independently verified outside the observer. If we had the facts to show what would happen in every single circumstance, then it wouldn't be a debatable idea, like the blood. All the facts point toward blood being necessary. There wasn't that one where they're like, well, we put leeches on them, and we bloodlet him, all the blood came out. Bro turned into an angel, went straight to heaven. And he's having a happier life now. We should do that no, nobody's going to say that. They're going to say he died. They all died. We took the blood out. Bad. That's just true. So opinions are interpretations of facts. Opinions can be convincing even though they aren't verifiable. And now here's the thing, is opinions can work, but you really want them to be the opinions of experts. The opinions of experts are more convincing than are those of individuals who have limited knowledge of an issue. Your personal opinions can be excellent evidence, provided you're verifiably knowledgeable about your subject. This also makes for good ethos. So here's the problem of even me. Like you might say, well, I'm writing a paper on education. So I'll interview Nichols since he's an expert in education. No, I really don't think I'm an expert in education. I'm an educator. But I don't hold an administrative position where I'm constantly in contact with a number of educators, nor do I have a number of educators. I would say that I'm an expert in Northeast Texas, small size community colleges, multi-campus community colleges, English departments, and the needs of individual teachers. That's about it. I can't even say that I know what it's like for people to teach in Dallas. I can't even imagine, like, what is it? In fact, there's some teachers who've talked about, like, here's what our Paris classrooms are like. And I taught at Sulphur Springs, I never taught at Paris. Did you know that every set of students, like each population, like the Greenville students are way different than the Sulphur Springs students?
How are we different?
Well, it's really weird, but one of the things we used to say was, we all noted this, is that you were far less participatory in class discussion. Like you're very interested in coming in, listening, and going home, rather than being asked questions and having to give answers. And you've come from a large number of areas. We have people who come from as far as Quinlan, Roy City. So we have a large spread of people from this direction who come here. Whereas Sulphur Springs are very close to Sulphur Springs. And they're very much more participatory in class discussion. Like they'll always participate. Like it doesn't matter what question you ask, somebody's answering. Sometimes it's hard to get people not to answer questions. They're like, well, I got a story. And you're like, well, let's hold off. Let's see if we got time for the story. We'll allow a story later. So that's just one difference. There were some other differences, and it's been so long since I've taught over there, I can't remember what the other differences are. Oh, people in the classes tended to know each other better. Like, chances are in this room you only know personally and hang out with one or two or three people.
You think that's why they talk more? They're like,
It very well could be. They could be more comfortable with the room. Yeah. I would say that's a pretty logical argument you're making there. If you're more familiar with people around you, maybe you're more likely to talk more. You're like, I know that guy, that guy, that guy, that guy, that guy, that guy. I can say what I want. So that could be another relationship. So it's very interesting, the differences. So I'm not even an expert, I don't think, in education at PJC. On this campus, maybe. What it's like in an English classroom, taught by a male. But I would literally need to do some research and find statistics, gather statistics about all over the country from community college English teachers, see what their experiences are, what their demographics are, classrooms, to really understand what it's like to be an English community college teacher in general. So you couldn't even say I'm an expert in being a community college English teacher. I'd say I know about 20% of what there is to know. And that's just the teaching stuff, and all the other stuff I would have to go and learn about. So it's going to be very important to find the opinions of experts, people who are experts in their field making claims about data within their field. Which is why many of the arguments that you see against climate change don't come from climate scientists. They're the ones you would want to pay attention to because they're the experts in that field. Many of the people who disagree with the idea of climate change are politicians. And you look at political journals are the ones that mostly say, well, climate change is not a big deal, it's not happening, it's a hoax. But the climate scientists are the ones, the experts you need to pay attention to, at least in that particular paper. This is where we'll start next time. I think usually I get through this slide, but we'll start here next time. Y'all have a great day.
You too.
Really be thinking about your research and hear what that thing's due on Wednesday night, Thursday, depending on who you are.
Thursday.
You're like, let's be real.